tongue is numb, the current's clean. Your dog is dead, it's a Ponzi screen. Ponzi screen, because it's just something to do.
I love the Home Depot.
Someone please live with Danny. Oh my God.
He's
building a friend.
Jason, for context, I've been like sort of low-key looking for a roommate, but I actually have another one. I have a roommate right now. I don't know how long they're going to stay, but they paid for rent in a rental market that in New York I could only describe as terrifying. Everybody is trying to rent out a room right now, and the rents in like Manhattan and what have you are like probably as low as they've been since like 2009. So
only $2,400 for like a closet.
Yes.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Partial closet.
Hey, that closet's got a mini fridge in it. Come on, what are you talking about?
Yeah. It's so things have been, but I've been taking the time to do some light renovation on my apartment, with the idea that maybe one day, whenever I do move out, I get the security deposit back. Who knows? But I like being that.
The next like roommate's gonna move into like an MC Escher style staircase.
Yeah.
And it's like, anyways, I've been lonely.
There's a cat in here. See if you can find it. This week we have, lovely, I was going to say Portland for a second. Los Angeles comedian Jason Van Glass, who's also what's the best way to describe
you?
Yeah. What is?
No one knows.
Yeah. Undefined
Comedian.
Yeah, comedian. Of course. Yeah.
Goddess.
Asexual, vegan, anarchist.
Nice. We like
Sort
all
of speak
this.
Japanese. Do you speak Japanese?
It's such a hard language, but I've been trying for like 20 years. And I did do study abroad there.
What was study abroad there like? Were you in Tokyo?
I was in Yokohama, which is near Tokyo, basically. And I was at Meiji Gakuin University's International Studies and Econ department. So everything was in English.
Mm-hmm.
I had studied Japanese at that point, but the classes were taught in English because it's peace studies is what they have there. So there were people majoring in peace, and they're trying to do everything in English so that they could do diplomacy type work.
Oh, yeah. I've actually heard of peace studies before. Actually,
it's pretty big in Japan since 1945.
Yeah, I bet.
They take it very seriously based on a couple of things went wrong before then. They're not great, and they're trying to avoid any of that happening again.
If I were Japanese, I would associate nothing with the English language but peace. There's nothing else I can think of.
Yeah. No,
When I think of the English language, I automatically think, oh, peace. That's the most beautiful double language of peace.
Yeah, it's
so I majored in econ and we took econ classes there, but it was what the Japanese school got out of it was having a bunch of Californians around that they could practice their very excellent English on.
Yeah, so you're there. They're there speaking pretty good English, and you're there speaking not
excellent
great,
English.
not great.
Not even required to speak Japanese. I mean, some of the people in the program had not studied Japanese. Some of the other UC students.
But when did you learn like some naughty words? And can you teach us some naughty words?
I don't necessarily know any naughty words.
No, there's no.
I know they exist, but it's a very formal language. I'll put it this way: I was watching. On Netflix, if you switch your interface language to Japanese, it will activate Japanese dubbing for any Netflix program.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on your Netflixes, you can choose like Spanish and maybe French. But if you change your menu language to Japanese, you can watch any Netflix thing in Japanese. And the only one that's made any sense to me was The Crown, because they speak like textbook they speak very polite language in The Crown. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And so for the first time in my life, I was watching something that was in like textbook Japanese, which is like how you would speak to like a person of honor. And it's the only thing I've ever been able to like follow coherently in Japanese, despite actively like seriously studying the language on and off many times over 20 years.
None of your classmates taught you like dick? Or
No.
fish?
Again,
or
most of the
nothing?
UC students had no Japanese experience, and all
Yeah.
of our classes were in English, so we were in a kind of bubble. And then, especially as a white person, if you're in Tokyo or Yokohama is a historically kind of international trading city of Japan. So it's
Oh,
one
okay.
reason the program was there is that
Oh,
Yokohama
okay.
was where like the Dutch were allowed to live on an island in the harbor. So it's the sort of
Back
historically
to the
international
island.
city. Uh,
Back to the island near the island.
but anywhere we would go, there'd just be people trying to like practice English on us,
Oh.
and which is fine. It's very polite.
Yeah.
It's very like friendly of a very friendly place
Yeah.
for an American. And people try to ask you in English, like, how long are you here? Why are
Yeah.
you in Japan? Wasn't like a great way to practice Japanese. There was a French student whose third language was English, and his English got excellent over the year that he was there. He's just living with a bunch of Californians and taking a bunch of classes, most of which are in English. And he was very good at Japanese, and people just
Oh.
like refused to speak it to him.
What? No, they
You know what I mean? He would try and he ended up having to go to the hospital, and he's trying to just turn the language back into Japanese, where it's like he's explaining in Japanese, like, I don't speak English, and they just like refuse to accept that a white person could speak Japanese.
That's so funny. God.
So that wasn't like great for I'm sorry, I don't have any fun Japanese words for you.
That's fucked up, man. I don't know. I mean, thanks for coming on, but you got
End of the podcast.
Yeah.
Jason, you mentioned that you I don't know how jokingly you did mention it, but you did say that you identify partially as an anarchist, or at the
yeah, I don't. It's hard. It's a hard label because I don't know what other people mean when they talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. So, but I mean, I'd say
I would say
say
is to not really have a defined.
yeah, it's
strengths.
non hierarchical at the very least. And yet you have an interesting history because you also are an econ major, and I would say conservatively in the last 5 years there's been a much more invigorated interest in like left politics from the general populace, and at the same time, very subtly, people are also sort of debunking and sort of looking at what hard econ people, your Milton Friedman types, are sort of what they prescribe to the world, and what they sort of how true that was, which it turns out it's probably not that true. So but I'm curious what your experience was, kind of like living both of those things, and if you sort of like transitioned from one to the other, or did that.
For starters, I went to UC Santa Cruz,
Sure.
home of the banana slugs.
Yes.
Like if you don't know anything about UC Santa Cruz, like its reputation is it's in the forest. It was founded in the 60s. It has like a very like hippie left-wing reputation. I think when I was there, of the UCs, it also had like the highest parental income of people. So it was not like it's like that type of like left-wing hippiedom.
Yeah.
The only type that we appreciate a Ponzi scheme.
And so I can't compare my I would say pretty shallow econ education that I received. I don't think I got like a very in-depth one, not through no fault of UC Santa Cruz, but I also can't compare it to what you might get at University of Chicago or UC Irvine or something. But it wasn't like completely just like most high school econ textbooks, to the extent that anyone is even studying this, are written by complete right-wing lunatics that have that job because what the beliefs they express are like so useful to people that are in power that there's a whole like marketplace for them to like write books and have fellowship positions and propagate this sort of George W. Bush type of economic ideology. And that's not exactly what UC Santa Cruz teaches, even if I didn't receive like an introduction to like left-wing radicalism. Like we didn't read Marx either, but it's not.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I think we split the difference for what it's worth.
What made you interested in studying economics?
That's a good question. I was simply interested in it. That's like why I majored in it. I would say like 90% of the people going through the department were majoring in business, and all of them were doing it because their parents thought it would be like practical.
Mm-hmm.
And I was studying it just because I thought it was like interesting, and I felt like I had some aptitude for it. Unlike other things, it made sense to me. I've been on eBay since 1998.
Yeah.
So I've always been like into like flipping collectible things, and the game of that is like always was like fun to me as a teenager, and it's like still kind of fun. And I had been introduced to the subject in high school through academic decathlon. It's one of the 10 subjects in academic decathlon.
Oh yeah.
And
cool.
Academic decathlon teams, certainly at that time, I have no idea what's going on now, but you'd have like 3 people with an A average, 3 people with a B average, and 3 people that had a C average. And you could sort of funge you could include PE or not to get into the category you needed. Mm-hmm. So I was in academic decathlon because we could make my kind of B- grades like a C+ grade if we don't include
Rock
PE
on.
or art or something, whatever I was getting A's in.
Yeah.
So I was in this underperformers category on our team as a C student that could still carry my weight, hopefully. And that's econ was one of the subjects, and econ just made sense to me, and I became like it became my subject that I could be the study leader for the other teammates. So it was something where I was on this team with these people I'm still friends with who are like very good at science things and math, and like have way better aptitude for some of these other things. And it was something where feeling maybe insecure about my inability to just sort of understand chemistry. I did just sort of understand economics. I don't know. To me, it seems like simple. I don't know if that's true for other people or not.
And have you always held some of the political ideologies that you hold now?
No, I don't think my ideology has changed, but my ability to describe it has become more precise.
Yeah, I think I can absolutely relate to
you
that.
You learn what anarchism is, and you're like, oh, okay, that just like clarifies my inherent distrust of the government or whatever.
Sure. I mean, I can remember in like 2008, 2009 when I was a little bit younger, still justifying like this sort of weird technocratic, beliefs of, the Democratic Party and what have you, and just sort of like half-heartedly being like, well, we gotta vote for him, but in sort of like in the back of your head, just sort of being like, this isn't feel right.
I would say I've been a reluctant liberal Democrat since high school, but I think like a lot of people have have less patience for what 20 years of that has gotten us in my lifetime in the last couple of years, and have become maybe more just like more radicalized a little bit, but I don't think I've had like a profound switch in my beliefs.
I joined ISIS, so I'm with you.
Good for you. Yeah. It's fun to be part of something.
That's mostly what it is. Just here for the friends.
Just the community.
You buy a Toyota Hilux, David?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you buy a Toyota Tacoma from 1994 with 500,000 miles on it. Good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
ISIS loves dependable trucks that last forever, that they can fit 17 dudes on.
Yeah, it'll last as long as the next caliphate.
Yeah, that's the last caliphate was a really old truck. Was a Nissan Datsun from 1975.
I guess since this is like an interesting episode, we're coming up on like the year, right, when New York first went to shut down and everything. Like, what was it like for you a year ago? From being like, sounds like you were incredibly active in the comedy community.
Yeah, trying to be.
But I mean, like, no, I mean, like what you're doing, I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of responsibility. That's a lot of commitments. That's seeing people all the time. Just like thinking about that is almost giving me agoraphobia of like interacting with that many people.
Yeah, because you go out and you interact with people twice a night, 7 nights a week, if you're out doing stand-up or improv.
Exactly. So like, what was there a hard lockdown for you? When or was it like a slow trickle? Tell us about like that process
for
of
me,
moving into a lockdown.
I just like pieced out immediately. And
what is immediate? Like what day? Do you remember? Like March last year?
Yeah.
Pretty early, like maybe March 12th or something.
Oh, nice.
Like shows for the next week were canceled, and my class was canceled. Like we're not doing a show this Monday, just putting the word out. But so I just like having lived in LA for like 9 years at that point in Hollywood, I just knew I didn't want to be in Hollywood during like any sort of emergency because I didn't trust my neighbors. You know what I mean? It worked out fine, but it's like
Yeah.
LA is. I just didn't trust. It's just not a safe place to be if there's not enough anything, like not enough electricity or water or something. And luckily, it didn't come to that really. But since I had the opportunity, I had some place to go to my family's house. I just left, and knowing that I could drive back if I had to.
Or is that like that seems to be a pretty prevailing attitude in Los Angeles, to not trust your neighbor?
I mean, it's just a history of LA. So I don't trust the LAPD. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I just know that like there was a heat wave once and power was out, and I live in the Hollywood Hills. Like, I live 1 block into it, but like there's $1 million plus houses like 100 feet behind my apartment, and so this is not even like a like quote unquote bad part of LA or dangerous part of LA, but there's still tent cities in my semi fancy part of LA.
Sure.
And the power was out once, and it was like a heat wave, and so the like street lights weren't working, and like people were like driving on the sidewalk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The power was out for 30 minutes, and it was like at 95 degrees out, and I felt like people. I went to Gelson's, which is like a fancy market I can walk to from my apartment. I felt like a riot was going to break out where people were going to steal kombucha. Does that make sense? There was like a Spike Lee tension in the air where someone was going to throw a trash can through like a crystal store window,
Right.
and I don't. So it's not even. It's just like, given who the president was or whatever, I had my go bag ready, and I just got out of there. I wasn't waiting to see if we do have enough water or whatever.
Yeah.
So, do you think that like there's something about like the construction of LA as a city that really lends itself to being like one emergency away from anarchy or bad in a bad way, barbarism?
I think a lot of people like LA has a terrible reputation. Let's be honest, and the people that live there have like a bad reputation. And I think it's like a very small subset of people that are generating that reputation. Where I've met dozens of wonderful, human, empathetic people, but the truth is that for like 150 years now, sociopaths from all over the world have been kicked out or run out of their little town, and they're like, well, Peoria is not big enough for me. I'll show you. And people with psychological disorders have been like, honestly, like literally run out of town, and they end up in Los Angeles. And some of them have power in Los Angeles. They become agents, or like Harvey Weinstein or these types of people that are like sociopaths, right? Bill Cosby's a sociopath, and he found like a place in a industry that he could use to his advantage for that reason. So there are these drive on the sidewalk people, even though the typical Angelino is like just as rolling their eyes or exhausted by that person as anyone would be. There's more sociopaths per capita than any place else in the world.
It certainly got like that delusion, like it definitely attracts like the delusions of grandeur type of personality and like the escapism of it. And there's just something so alluring about Hollywood and comedy and that sort of industry that just attracts.
I mean, I'm one of them, but that's
all of us, right?
It's like you don't move to LA and like abandon a safer life and like leave your family and the support behind to do this thing if you don't believe in yourself. But the great part about LA is that you can meet all these other people that are like, let's start a band, right? Like theoretically, it's all these people that are like interested in like, we should be filming sketches. I want to write a screenplay or whatever. Like all these people that have this bug to do something, but
right.
the periphery of that personality type is like a really unstable person. And
totally.
And those unstable people, it doesn't mean that they aren't also rich, right? They drive in their convertible on the sidewalk. I was back in LA for only the third time during this whole year, just for a couple of hours, because I'm adopting a puppy. And
awesome.
So a few days ago, I was in LA for like an afternoon to like meet the puppy, and then immediately leave LA. And I was stuck in traffic at like 3:00 in the afternoon on the 101 freeway, just classic LA traffic. And the guy next to me was in a BMW M3, and he was putting the top down and drinking a beer. He's just like, it's good to be back. You know what I mean? Like,
cool.
So
Honestly,
it's
man.
not the place you want to be when shit goes down.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to pivot a little bit to another very large state, to talking about what's been going on with Texas, because
of course.
there was something that just came out, and this is like obviously what this winter storm in Texas is old news, but something came out last week that has kind of revealed the degree to which people are falling through the cracks, and it's not just like the homeless; it's literally the entire population of Texas through their some of the stuff that's been going on with their quote unquote regulator of their energy system. So Texas, just a brief overview, has a completely deregulated energy market is what they use. They use this, they call it a market, which is like important to, it's not called a system, it's called a market.
Yes. And it's also crucially not connected to other power sources. So it's not a matter of, hey, we need more power. Can you give it to us? No, you can't. Like the physical infrastructure isn't there to get extra power.
As I understand it, there's no line connecting Arizona. There's no power line that connects Phoenix or maybe San Diego to Texas. So even if San Diego had extra power, they couldn't send it to Texas.
So yeah, I mean, there this deregulatory thing kind of like happened. I think it's the 80s or 90s. I didn't follow up on the history on that sort of stuff, but what I did notice was a letter that came and was all over the financial press. It was talking. This is from Bloomberg. This is Texas watchdog, basically. It says the grid operator made a $16 billion error.
Whoa!
So what happened was, this is
something in their favor.
Yeah.
So
it's weird how it always goes that one direction.
Yeah.
So this basically what was going on in the middle of the winter storm, hundreds of thousands of people lost power, lost heat, lost water. People were dying. It seemed like the whole system was just completely collapsing under like 3 inches of snow in this winter storm that Texans had no idea how to handle. There is a energy kind of, what do they call it? They don't call it
ERCOT.
ERCOT. Okay, it's known as ERCOT. It's the grid manager. Okay, and there is a firm that was hired. Okay, so again, another private entity that was hired to look at what happened. Okay, so when power goes out, what happened was people all of a sudden were looking on their bills and seeing $10,000 for the month of January on their electric bill or heat bill. Even more than that. I mean, just like, so there's this. The Bloomberg article has this image that is it's like I can't really describe it to the podcast people, but there was, when you're like on like a heart monitor at the hospital, and then all of a sudden, and then someone dies, and it just
like an incident. It goes way up and it goes way down.
Yeah, or just and like you flatline, right, and it's in the middle, right?
Yeah.
So there's this pricing model that looks like a heart monitor in Bloomberg, and instead of flatlining in the middle, it flatlines at the very top. So it just it flatlines at $9,000 or something like that.
Yeah, $9,999 to turn on your light bulb.
Yeah, exactly. So,
which everyone knows what the price of energy is every time they flip a light switch. So I don't see what the problem is.
You
check the market. Then you microwave something. And if it's not a good market price, you just microwave it later.
Yeah. Exactly. Just eat tomorrow. So they set the price of electricity at $9,000 because during a grid emergency, it is apparently good to effectively price gouge. And that is the thinking behind this was kind of amazing in this Bloomberg article, is that, this is just reporting, right? So like they can't really have too much like editorializing in it, but they say that this is what they call it. It's called an incentive to have it be at a high enough point, because that will reward these private energy creators.
They weren't going to make that much energy that day, but they've decided it's worth it now.
Yeah, because they make more money. Yeah.
They were
It's
going to
like,
go home early at the nuclear power plant, but then they decided, actually, maybe we should get $10,000 a second.
Yeah.
You want
This is
to
just
you want to extract? We want to burn twice as much coal today.
Yeah.
so they basically what happened was when they capped out at $9,000. This is when prices. This is from the article itself. When prices neared the $9,000 cap on the first day of the blackouts, they soon dipped to $1,200. A fluctuation that the Utility Commission later attributed to a computer glitch. Just a little
In their
glitch.
favor?
What?
Weird.
Yeah.
It's so weird that it never drops to like a weird price for the consumer that's like a penny or something.
Yeah.
It's always $9,000. It's never a penny. What a weird error.
What a
Yeah.
weird error. I mean,
Yeah.
but it shows just how arbitrary this is, right? And how, I mean, it's like, this is one of those examples where it's either like cruel or incompetence. And neither of them look very good for like a deregulated.
It's not incompetence. The whole system, this is what the system was designed to do.
Yeah.
Right.
People think that they don't understand like the stock market, like the GameStop thing, where people were like, I guess I just don't understand it, and they do. It's just crazy. Like it's not. It's as stupid as it looks on its face, and it's so stupid that you're like, I don't. This is too complicated for me to understand. And you're like, no, it's just nonsense. Like it's the stock market's not real. And you're like, oh, this is. It's I can't explain. Like it can't. The simple explanation for why a deregulated electricity market costs $9,000 a kilowatt is that's what it's designed to do. They had the best day of their lives. That's why they fought for it, and that's why it's not like a mystery.
Right.
But it's such a crazy thing. You think like, oh, there must be something I don't understand about this. It can't simply just be a scam.
Right.
But
Yeah.
no, it's a scam. Now you understand economics.
There you go.
Yeah.
So effectively, the private entity is, which their name is called Potomac Economics, which just sounds like a school of thought, I guess. I don't know how else to put it. Like Potomac Economics just sounds like a professor at UC.
That's the name of a company, or
yeah.
Okay.
So they were the one who they sent this letter recommending that the utility, the ERCOT, send over $1.5 billion, like rebate $1.5 billion. Okay.
That'll teach them.
So when you say rebate $1.5 billion, give $1.5 billion back to people, or what?
Well, to adjust it on their billing, but I'm not sure whether that means that like the billing that's going to be owed.
But out of how many trillions of like scam profit, when you dump toxins into the river causing $1 trillion of damage, and then you have to pay $50 million in fines.
Yeah.
$1 trillion in profit from whatever crazy thing you did.
Right. Mm-hmm. It resulted in $16 billion in charges. That was like excessive charges, $16 billion. But again, it's like one of these things.
So the plan is to teach them a lesson by letting them only make $15 billion of profit.
Yeah. You better not.
Definitely not going to happen again next winter, because we only let them earn $15 billion profit.
That's exactly right.
No bonuses this year.
So it's asking the commission to direct, to be precise about what they're asking for, to direct ERCOT to correct the real-time price of electricity from 12 a.m. on February 18th to 9 a.m. on February 19th. Doing so would save end customers around $1.5 billion that otherwise would be passed through to them from the electricity providers.
But on their bills that are how much higher than they would normally be.
Yeah.
The 1.5 billion doesn't mean anything if the bills are $4 trillion higher than they would have been in a regulated market. It's like, oh, we've reduced your $12,000 monthly electricity bill to only $8,000. You're welcome. It's not still a terrible scam.
So if you want to hear the most obnoxious group trade association that you may have ever heard in your life, you guys ready for it?
Yes.
The Texas Competitive Power Advocates.
That's the industry group.
That's the trade association representing electricity generators in Texas.
I have to say, David, that name, like you sort of present it as like, this is terrible, and I'm like, it can't be that terrible, and it sounds bland initially, but then the more I hear I think I kind of rolled it around. I'm like, ugh. I like what the Texas Advocacy something. What was it again?
Texas Competitive power.
No, yeah, right there,
advocates.
right there where it says competitive. I'm like, no, I know where this is going. Yeah.
It's kind of one of those things where sometimes like the cliche is just made so for a reason. Like this is like those four words together in some ways are like just like this is exactly what you imagine like Texas plutocratic douchebags to be, and they really are. They said retroactively changing the prices could discourage future investments
Sure.
in Texas's electricity markets. But yeah, I mean, they just completely, they're like, oh, this is going to hurt our incentives, and this is going to be too confusing for people later.
I mean, there's no reason to take this thing you're reading at any face value. It's just a scam. It's like it's like if you manufacture like widgets, and the widgets normally cost $1, but due to an emergency where people need widgets to survive, they're temporarily $10,000. You can produce as many widgets as you want, and the price is 10,000. If the price was 5,000, would you not also produce the same number of as many widgets as possible? And so it's like, oh, it'll discourage people because they can only sell the widget for 1,000 times the normal price instead of 10,000 times. And it's like, no, you'd be selling as many widgets at 1,000 times the price as 2,000. It's complete nonsense. There's no reason to take.
Yeah, it's like oh man,
we shouldn't spend too much time thinking about this one.
No, this one is like, oh, you guys, you don't understand. Our CEO is only going to be able to buy a Mercedes S-Class as opposed to a McLaren, and that cannot happen. All right.
Yeah, a CEO salary is a perfect analogy. It's like, well, if we didn't pay them $40 million, they wouldn't work as hard as if we paid them $35 million. It's like, that's definitely not a factor. They're going to do the same amount of work, however easy or hard it is. They're not going to work harder if they get 40 million instead of 30 million a year. Maybe there's a difference between 100,000 and 4 million, but there's not a difference between 30 million and 35 million. You're going to do the number of hours that the job takes if that's the base. Do it.
I think this brings up a good economic theory that I feel like people don't talk enough about, which is elasticity. And this is like, Jason, do you want to explain what elasticity is?
Oh God, I haven't thought about economics in 20 years. Yes.
Okay, so
why don't you tell me what you think it is?
There you go. There it is. There it is. Yeah. You're just yes-anding me right now. You know. No, but it's like elasticity is depending on the need or how elastic something is will determine their willingness to pay depending on when the price goes up. Okay.
Right. So there's your elasticity of demand for water. Every day you need, let's say, 5 gallons of water at a minimum, or you're in trouble, right? And so if water's $1, then you're going to buy 5 gallons. And if water's $1,000, you still might have to try and buy 5 gallons. But if water's a penny, your elasticity of demand for water is limited. Maybe if water is consistently a penny, as it is in this country, it's actually subsidized below like its market rate, and so people have lawns in Los Angeles, for example, because they're not paying a market price for water. But in general, you don't drink more water just because it's cheaper. Your elasticity of demand for water is limited, whereas your elasticity of demand for Funko Pops maybe does change based on the price. I don't encourage anyone to do this. They are cursed totems. But let's say you want Funko Pops. If they're on sale for $1, you might buy hundreds of them. And if they cost $100 each, you might just buy your one favorite character, right? So that's a highly elastic item where the price really changes how much your demand is versus your demand for 2,000 calories a day, or your demand for water, or your demand to not freeze to death inside your house in one of the richest countries in the world is like a pretty...
I actually have
relatively limited. Is that, did I get it right?
I have a highly inelastic demand for Funko Pops.
Yeah.
Right. I at any price would not take them into my home because they curse you. There's clearly a cursed totem.
Yeah.
The more of them you own, the more cursed they are. I haven't seen one yet that sparked any joy. They're very clearly just like... You
have a negative elastic demand.
Negative inelastic demand. They're an inessential item, and so, you know, if they're on sale, you might buy twice as many, right?
Yeah.
But nobody's buying twice as many gallons of water. Most people, like I say, there are these exceptions. You might have a crazy garden if water's really cheap, but
there's the hoarders.
Yeah.
That's my best to have an elasticity based on a memory of 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I think you got it, man. I mean, when I bring it up because it's nice to have an econ major here, but it's the whole concept of a completely deregulated energy market is bad economics. Also, like, absolutely, Jason, you're right. This is all a scam, but like most of capitalism is. But like, if we're actually going to like take into account economic like theories, there is something about like when something is elastic, like purely elastic, you can have things like it being unregulated.
Whatever economic theory the people that put this system into place use to justify it is not their real motivation. Their real motivation is that they want to charge you $10,000 an hour during emergencies for electricity because they'll make $1 trillion. Republicans like, I love free speech, and it's like, but you don't love this free speech. It's just like it's this intellectual facade they put on. They try and hang it on some sort of intellectual theory, but they don't actually believe that. 100% this was motivated. They knew exactly what they were doing. It's not a mistake that the market didn't break. It worked exactly the way it was meant to work. And because they have purchased the politics in Texas, because the politicians are in league or in the pocket of these donors, they made it happen.
Yeah, it does seem like the in this case,
I guess it's just like, for me, like sorry, Dan, if you don't mind.
Oh no, please. Yeah.
I do think that it's important to talk about it because economic principles still exist outside of like crony capitalism or like this like absolute dog shit system that we have in America, because like
they do.
Like, and so you need to talk about that because like capitalism and economics are different things. You still have economic incentives under communism or anarchism or any other economic system. Principles of economics still exist, and like,
there are economic principles that exist separate from human politics, but the only economic principles that we value in our culture are going to be ones that reinforce the existing power structure. And that's why you have all of these foundations that print nonsense books and buy 1 million copies of them, why you have why Milton Friedman has fellowships named after him. It just like, it's not limited to economics. Literally any society anywhere on earth, if your message reinforces power or expands power for the people that have power, then your message will be heard and celebrated and platformed. And if your message undercuts that, then it will be buried or attacked or dismissed. And so when someone talks about economic principles, they're always talking about just the principles that underline, that underline, that platform business interests.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I don't think that economics is necessarily empirical either, but it's like a system. It's like
it can be thought. But the economics that has reach and has platform and has textbooks, the people that write these textbooks, all of that's paid for by business interests, and it has airtime on radio and Fox Business, MSNBC and CNBC. Like the stock market's nonsense.
But that's
right?
not a reason not to talk about elasticity. But like that's not a reason to talk about elasticity.
Of course not.
Understand.
But to me,
understand what like.
To me, it's a starting principle of what we need to talk about because.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, and a thing we talk about all the time on the podcast is just basically how you were saying, like you mentioned the stock market for a brief moment. It's like David's always saying, like the stock market is a mood ring. That's it. So it's just gambling, and if you accept that, then you understand the stock market. But CNBC exists to create a narrative to kind of gaslight you into not seeing what's right in front of you, which is that it's just gambling. It's not connected to any real economic factors. Our economy is not based on its success. It's just gambling. It's just day trading. It's just split-second trades. But CNBC and hundreds of other things, Bloomberg terminals, exist to generate this counteracting narrative to sort of trick people that aren't really that invested in it into thinking that I just don't understand the stock market. Well, no, you do if you think it seems like a scam. You do understand it. Yeah.
And that's true of not just economics. Like I say, it's true of politics and everything. It's not even limited to American society. It's true of culture 1,000 years ago that if the emperor says he's descended from God, then who gets to write history about this guy? Like if the king says God chose him, it's not like everyone even believed that, right?
What I like about having you on the podcast is I asked about elasticity and you went to the Japanese emperor in 1945. This is
It's like
why
one of
you're
the
a
only
good
things I
guest.
know about.
This is why you're a good guest, because first off, you're making all good points and right on. And like we're with you on that. But I do want to focus on like the because like look, I'm a financial journalist and I'm with you on all this sort of stuff. Like I do want to like this sort of stuff needs to be reported on because there are because like yes, I ultimately see that there is like a pyramid structure, but there are competing factions within that pyramid structure. And there are some people that can take away certain factions of power from each other out of self-interest.
The only way to reform it or fix it is to become a powerful group yourself, and like in order for us as Americans to pass a minimum wage, we're going to need to create a voting block of activism and a power block that organizes and demands this thing to counteract the much larger demand from a small handful of like why did both Delaware Democrats vote against this? Because it's bad for the six guys that pay for their campaign.
Yeah.
It'd be good for 35% of their constituents, but it's bad for their 10 friends. And we need to, in order to fix the Texas market or to get any sort of reform law passed, we do need to become a power in our own right. So I agree completely. We should talk about it. I just don't want to, not that we did this yet, but like, how much time is spent on Twitter, like dunking on a conservative for being a hypocrite. And it's like, they don't care that they're a hypocrite. They don't believe in it's like, oh, you caught them in hypocrisy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, oh, good one. As though that's not, as though they're principled people that like truly believe in free speech all the time or something, instead of just when it applies to them.
Yeah, I think that I certainly agree with you that that's true, but like it does warrant a question of like, when are we going to be thinking about like what the ultimate answer to it is? And what the reason why I brought up elasticity is just that ultimately this is treating energy like a commodified good is still relying on price, and that is still relying on elasticity. And then like this is weird, like a PG&E in California, regulated markets, you're not going to have a $9,000 like price gouging that's going to happen in an emergency, but there's still ultimately huge commodification issues. Its own sort of like problem
was also privatized like 30 years ago.
Exactly.
And are you ready for this? To save money each year to make their, like they have to answer to the stock market because now they're a privately held company that trades, like they have to kind of generate increased growth every year as though they're like a Lululemon or something. And they stopped doing annual maintenance they stopped spending money on annual maintenance to make the books look better than they were the year before, when they had to spend all this money like keeping tree branches away from power lines, etc. And that is why the vast majority of wildfires in California are started by PG&E. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people have been killed by fires started by PG&E, and it's a direct result of them being privatized and no longer doing maintenance. And so now in California, the power is not on during high winds. You just have rolling intentional blackouts because PG&E can't guarantee that the equipment won't be faulty because they haven't done maintenance for 30 years. And we no longer have power 24/7 because it could just burst into flames at any time. So that's what's going on in California's energy market.
You guys, you don't understand. We can't turn the power on. There's these branches. They might hit like a 1,000-watt transformer. We can't.
Or just be sparking next to brush 24/7.
Yeah.
And when it was a public company, they did that stuff to save money to increase their stock market potential. They stopped doing basic maintenance, and hundreds of people have died just in the last 2 years from PG&E. And there are more regulations in California in terms of like, they can't charge you $10,000 a kilowatt or whatever. They can't charge you $1,000 a minute to run a light bulb. But just like in Texas, it was to a less extreme extent, but it was privatized, and the result has been hundreds of deaths, thousands.
What you're saying is talking about systems matters.
Yes.
And the way that we understand how like a system operates gets to the root of like what is like I don't know. I guess
I think pointing out that the emperor is not wearing clothes is vital to these types of situations, right? Whatever the subject is, where we have this, people are freezing to death in their homes. There's people starving to death on the streets in this country.
When did PG&E privatize?
I believe it was about 30 years ago.
Yeah, so right around the same time as Texas.
They did not do this free for all Wild West market that you're talking about in Texas. I think there's still some they're still subject to state regulations and price controls of some kind. But this idea that they would be like a more efficient company if they had to answer to the stock market, well, what was the result? The result is that thousands of people have burned to death because of PG&E. And I think we can look this up, but I believe it's something like 95% of the fires that were able to be traced back to like what started them in California in like 2018 were started by faulty PG&E equipment. So it's not even just like one fire killed 100 people. One fire killed 100 people. Also, like 100 of the 120 other fires were also started by PG&E equipment.
It sounds sort of like really, and maybe this isn't a nice way to sort of kind of like, sync it all together when you think about like, this like the study of like economics and then like, terminology that plays into it and what have you. And it's the end result is like, we can talk about how certain terms essentially mean one thing and like how that affects stuff. But at the end of the day, the really important thing to notate and to vocalize to people is like, okay, maybe perhaps this is the terminology that they're using, perhaps as an excuse, but it's not really useful to just be like, you're breaking your own rules. It's almost,
and you're arguing on their terms. If you if you're trying to like shame Mitt Romney into doing the right thing by engaging him in a debate on like Senate procedures, you're just operating on his false terms. He only believes in those things when they suit him. And if you're trying to like make him agree to this thing that he only believes in when it suits him, you just need to point out the emperor has no clothes. And this thing in Texas is a perfect opportunity to not get bogged down in the propaganda that they invented to get this law passed.
Sure.
About whether it's like real or not. It's not real. And it's not why they passed the law. They invented that propaganda so they could pass this thing, so they could do exactly what happened. And this is an opportunity to pull the curtain back and point out the Wizard of Oz is this man pulling the levers, right? That it's not too complicated for someone to understand it. It's just a scam. It's not.
Yeah, it's just price gouging. Also, I mean, the fact that Bloomberg
at face value.
The fact that Bloomberg never mentions that this is price gouging, I think is.
Well, of course. Why would they? That's not what their readers want to hear.
Well, but they're supposed to be. I know.
Does any working class person in the world read Bloomberg? No, they don't. They can't afford it. It's not for them.
Right.
Are Wall Street Journal editorials in good faith? No, they are meant to create a false narrative. Like the conservatives, the New York Times pays $1 million a year to write easily debunked, embarrassing nonsense on like a daily basis. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The Bret Stephens articles are always.
We're just like, but they're not. That's why Bret Stephens has a job. That's what that job is for, is to generate this alternate reality where things aren't what they seem. There's actually this kind of other thing. Have you thought about it this way? And then they come up with some random thing that doesn't hold up to any scrutiny, but you're just generating kind of agitprop. What is Fox News doing 24 hours a day? It's creating an alternate narrative so that you won't just see things as they are.
Yeah, you can't just say like you're killing people.
That 500,000 people are dead. Tune into Fox News. It's about like Hunter Biden or Hillary Clinton or something. It's not about it's not about Texas energy markets, people freezing to death in their own homes, right? Yeah, and I think we saw during the Trump presidency how extreme reality could be without breaking those narratives. That people can be freezing to death in their own homes in urban city and the richest country that's ever existed in human history, and it won't pierce the narrative of like, well, they should have like worked harder or something. The liberals making this assumption where it's like, well, they should have voted differently. Who says
that's disgusting?
Yeah,
who says they didn't vote for the right guy? I'm using air quotes on the podcast.
We were talking about Japanese earlier and how it's a different language altogether and hard and not easy and all that stuff. And you can really just think about this stuff like all the weird agitprop, like you're saying. It's just Latin, and they want people to only speak in this dead thing that's not going to
Right.
correctly explain what's happening, when really what you have to say is you have to say in whatever tongue you speak that like they're killing us and they're trying to hide it in something that we don't understand.
Hey there, everyone. This is Editor Danny here. Just wanted to add a note that I just typed out for you guys. Ponzi Scream does not condone acts of terrorism. In concordance with that statement, it is also important to study and deeply understand the effects of a hegemonic media and understand why specific individuals feel the full brunt of our legal system, while at the same time large corporations are given carte blanche to destroy and undermine society and the environment at large. Again, we do not condone terrorism, and you'll understand why I'm saying this in a moment.
I read a very good book by a man named Theodore Kaczynski. It's called Industrial Society and its Future.
Unfortunate last name.
And what Dr. Kaczynski posits in this so-called manifesto is that is, I think, a very insightful. He was the youngest person ever tenured at UC Berkeley. So at age 20, he went to Harvard when he was 16 and graduated when he was 19 or 20 with a math degree. He had this incredible academic career. He was the youngest person in any field ever tenured at UC Berkeley, this thing that every academic is their life's goal. And he felt that math was useless, that the reason that there's two kinds of math. There's math that reinforces the existing power structure. That is, it makes systems of surveillance more effective. It makes missiles more effective. It makes the government have more power and more control, right? And that's one thing we value, is the military industrial math. And then there's the second math that you show off by how useless it is. So there's two types of math. One is you're demonstrating how valuable you are and smart you are by working on something of no value whatsoever, or you demonstrate your value by working on something that supports the existing power structure. And that's why math is valued in our society as like an academic profession, and poetry is not. And I think that's a really clear insight into what is of value in our society. And the reason economics is a department at every college in the country and exists is because 90% of it, right, is there colleges have this reputation for being Marxist, but who ever got a Marxist business degree? Why do business degrees even exist?
Yeah.
To indoctrinate people in this thing. And their money comes to found these chairs and to found these departments from the beneficiaries of this sort of invented system. And even though Marx is the most famous economist of all time,
right?
Sure.
Economics as a field exists, nutrition as a field exists to reinforce the existing power structure.
Sorry, did you just say nutrition?
Yeah. All nutritional research is paid for by this, same as this Council of Competitive whatever.
Sure.
Nobody's paying to do research on milk except milk producers. To get grants to do nutritional research, it has to come from the Walnut Council or the Almond Growers Association or the Oats Authority or milk or the Beef Council. And they're not going to fund a study that undermines their business. And so all nutritional research is just propaganda, right? There's no money to do like a genuinely philosophical, inquisitive research into like the true nature of human nutrition. It only exists to support that you should be eating more beef. Ted Kaczynski's book is called The Unabomber Manifesto. That's not what he named it. He's a famous crazy person. Why do you think he's a famous crazy person? He killed a couple of people, yes. Chevron kills people. We just talked about how PG&E killed hundreds of people last year. Are they disgraced? No.
Sure.
Are their theories disgraced? No. Are they not invited? Are they in jail? No.
I like
Ted
this.
Kaczynski kills three people.
I like this.
Ted Kaczynski kills three people, and he's like a crazy person, right? And like, yeah, you should go to jail when you kill people. Chevron's killed tens of thousands of people. They've polluted rivers and jungles. They've murdered people that were trying to unionize in South America. They've committed assassinations. Chevron kills people every day. Even just in LA, air pollution kills tens of thousands of people a year still. But do the people that manufacture air pollution, are they discredited? Are they not welcome at the White House? Are their theories dangerous theories? No. And I think this is key to understanding. I mean, I guess this is what makes me an anarchist in quotes, right? is that I
Sure.
just don't. I think any system or theory you hear about has been designed to reinforce that the emperor is descended from the sun, and in your heart, you suspect this is not true. And so, we can go into Japanese history for like 20 minutes if you want, but I think the key
No.
like in 1860, the emperor was just a boy. He was not in charge of anything in Japan. It wasn't even clear if an emperor had been in charge of Japan in any meaningful way ever. But he was descended from a 1,000-year lineage, theoretically, of emperors who had no control or political power or anything. In 1867, he was made the emperor. Public schooling was created. Textbooks were written by the government, and they were written to teach children this new thing as though it was an old thing. That this emperor the emperors have been in charge for thousands of years. They have not. The emperor is descended from the goddess of the sun. Spoiler alert, he is not. And that's why schooling exists. You know what I mean? The schools weren't invented to teach the children free thinking. They literally invented schools to teach children a curriculum to brainwash you, if you will, this thing that reinforces this power structure. And that's 100% true in our society today. We just can't see it as clearly because we went through the schooling, right? And so in 1944 Japan, some percentage of people, I'm sure, did think that the emperor was divine, but lots of them did not. And if you read the letters from kamikaze pilots, the vast majority of them know exactly the bullshit situation they're in. They don't believe that they're dying for their country. They don't believe that their death will make any difference. What they write to their mother is that they are in this thing where they have no choice about what they have to do next, and they have to die for a lost cause they never believed in, and that they believe will make no effect because of the shunning, the cultural shame they would come on her and her family, and their siblings, and their name and death. And in the West, we think of these kamikaze pilots as being crazy. They were these true believers in this fanatical cause, when 99% of them were just kids that knew exactly that they just had been dealt a bad hand in life, right? They're 17, and if the person that's in charge of you in the military tells you got to do a thing, you got to do it. They'll just kill you otherwise. Either way, you're going to die.
Die with shame or die with honor.
Yeah.
Right. And so they go to their deaths, but they don't go to their deaths believing in you know what I mean?
It's not like Mad Max where they're just like, I've done it. I will become part of the storm.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Some of them believed it though.
Some of them believed it for sure.
Sure.
And some of the people believe in this, you know what I mean? Some people tried to overthrow for Trump too, and those are true believers. But even people that voted for Trump know in their hearts it's bullshit. They're just antagonizing you. Doesn't mean that they're liberal. They have these conservative beliefs, and they have this guy that's going to further their conservative beliefs. But do they really think he's not a criminal? No. They know he's a criminal. It's one of the things they like about him. And so you try and like disabuse them where it's like, but he's a liar. And it's like, yeah, they love that about him. They don't, they have no delusion about the fact that Donald Trump's lying constantly. They love it, right? Because he's lying for them. He's lying for their political thing, right?
Yeah. So,
but liberals will try and talk him out of it by engaging them in this debate as though they think Donald Trump's an honorable person. It's like,
yeah, so stop even doing the debate. Just call.
You're engaging that it's pointless to try and make someone see the hypocrisy of something that they don't actually literally believe in.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the idea is to influence a vote.
This is, I have to say, Jason, this has been a very, it's been kind of curvy and sort of undefined initially, but I like kind of where we ended up here, because ultimately, I mean, it is a situation where
start the podcast now.
Start it now. Yeah. This the curvy podcast.
Oh, you wanted me to hit record?
I didn't think we were going to talk about feudal Japan, but I'm glad we did.
Oh, I knew we were going to talk about it. It's like one of the only things I know about.
Yeah.
Oh, again, what do you know what Bushido is?
No, man. Are you fucking kidding me?
No. I know.
Yeah, just give me like a one sentence.
I think I know what Bushido is. Bushido is basically it's like an honor code, right?
Yes. And it's the alleged honor code that the samurai lived under. When was the word Bushido coined? The word Bushido was coined decades after the fall of the feudal system. So 30 years after the last samurai. And the last samurai was not a sword fighting man. He was a bureaucrat. His great-grandfather might have fought with a sword, but his great-grandson carries a sword and is just is a bureaucrat. And Bushido, just like Southern Hospitality or Gone with the Wind, is a revisionist history that creates this lost cause mythology to obfuscate the Confederate flag, putting up these Confederate statues. When were the Confederate statues put up? 1920. They weren't put up in 1850. They're put up in 1920. And Bushido is invented by someone who is idealizing the conservative warlord government, a completely corrupt and monstrous system of murderers. They didn't follow Bushido. Bushido is a retroactive philosophy that is being applied nostalgically to something to justify this type of conservative aim, exactly the way our Confederate statues. Because if you weren't coming from a American schooling perspective where you don't learn, I mean, literally yesterday, I learned that there was a enslaved black man on the Lewis and Clark expedition. Did you know that?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that.
And of course we don't know that, because why would our textbooks include that, right? Because it undermines everything about these two people, and it points out that they are slave owners, and it obfuscates the role that this black man, he was an equal participant in this, just like Sacagawea, who we sort of rediscovered 20 years ago, right? Where it's like we should be writing this person back into this history. And if you're coming from a non-American perspective and you look at what the American South was doing before the Civil War, on its face, it's monstrous. It's hideously monstrous. And so great effort has been expended to create a mythology to obfuscate the monstrosity of human slavery. And to a lesser extreme, right? I don't think I don't want to say these things are on par with human slavery. That's just an extreme example that clarifies what I'm saying. The field of economics, as you hear about it, like, yes, there are some academics somewhere writing genuinely interesting insights into these phenomenon, but the field of economics exists to justify the stock market, to justify corporate excess, to justify $40 million salaries for CEOs and deregulation. There's no pro-regulation economics fellowship, because who would pay for it? What job do you get? You major in deregulation, you major in regulating.
Jason Van Glass, where can people find you on social media or anywhere else?
Yes.
At my name, at Jason Van Glass on Twitter.
Okay.
It's probably just, it means so much to me if you follow me on Twitter. I only tweet like once a day, so it's not like a burden.
No, Jason's good on Twitter. He tweets the exact right amount, you know.
It's like once or twice a day. I'm very self-conscious about it, so I hope it's like never, hopefully, like boring or inane or repetitive.
Well, this was not that.
Well, it's because it's so insane and it's such a deep conversation to get, because there's a lot there. There's a lot to talk about, and there's just the analogs that you can make they're almost endless to a point. But ultimately, it's just good to remember too that it's just like you got to point out what is actually happening. If there's obfuscation of stuff, you got to.
I mean, I think it's also a point of just like no more talking at a certain point, right?
I would say to tie back to the slower start to this podcast, where it's like I don't think my politics have changed, but like the vote for the Dem no matter who, like what has that got me in my lifetime? I've been voting for 22 years.
Mm-hmm.
And did it stop the Iraq War? No, those people all voted for it. They love the Iraq War because it's good for business and it's good for power. And at a certain point, you have to stop engaging people on the artificial terms of their debate. They've invented those terms to stop you from just calling it out what it is. That these people are corrupt. The politicians are corrupt, right? But they come up with this elaborate thing about Senate rules or something. It's like, no, they don't want to pass a minimum wage. They don't want to send you a check.
Yeah.
And so they're coming up with these systems, these rationalizations about why they can't vote for this thing, because they don't want to help poor people. It's not complicated. It's not more complicated than that. It's as simple as that. That's not who elected them. That's not who gives their money to their campaign. So they don't care about those people. but they come up with a political philosophy that obfuscates the simple reality that it's apparent on its face if you just sort of turn off MSNBC for like 5 seconds.
Burn it to the ground. Don't trust anybody, and make sure you're not in Los Angeles when
if you take anything away from this podcast, it's that Ted Kaczynski was an exceptionally smart person with
yes,
a lot of good ideas.
Yes.
And honestly, like I got his manifesto, his so-called manifesto. It's called Industrial Society and Its Futures, from the LA Library. They had one copy. But if you if you read his treatise, he said if they published that, he would stop killing. Now they didn't know who he was or where he was living, but he from his cabin in Montana with no electricity made it known that if the New York Times or Washington Post would publish this, he would stop terrorism. And I think if you read that, you'd be hard pressed to find something where it's like he has a point. Like
sure.
His manifesto, sure. What he was so upset about in 1995. And he'd been bombing 15 or 20 years at that point. He believed that industrial society, capitalism, was ruining the environment in a way that we would not be able to recover from. And it was going to create environmental changes that were going to result in mass death and mass migrations and mass everything. And it's like, that's true. He was right about that, right? Was he wrong to think that global warming was going to be a problem and it was going to cause flood, all these things? That Texas is going to have this unseasonably cold weather? No, he was right. And his second thing was that computers, this is 1994 or 95 that he's writing this, that computers are going to get stronger and better every year, and that the incentives that drive the types of innovations in those things are innovations that reward and platform power holders, right? Your computer never gets better in a way, never gets more useful in a way that undermines the government. And it manifestos about how it's hard to conceive now in 1984 because the Dell computer seems pretty meaningless or whatever, but they're going to get better and better at tracking everything you buy, everyone you talk to, everywhere you go, and governments and corporations are going to use that to constrain your freedoms of choice, that you'll have fewer choices and opportunities available to you because of the surveillance that will happen from computers. Was he right about that? Right, he was right, wasn't he? Pretty insightful.
Pretty insightful, yes.
Pre-iPhone to be like, hey, I know it seems silly right now, but like, and that it won't even be malicious. That yes, that the funding research for any of this stuff comes from governments and corporations, and so the ends will suit their means. But also that, like, you don't want your child to be born with deformities, right? And so it makes sense to test for Down syndrome. It makes sense to test for anything you can test for. And as we get better and better at that, it's inevitable that children will be genetically engineered, right? That's an extreme example, but it's inevitable. And it's not because anyone's making a malicious decision. Every step of the way is logical decision. It's like, well, I don't want my child to be born too short, right? It'll affect the quality of their life. And so the same will be true with computers. Like a mapping system is very convenient. It's so convenient to buy things on Amazon. Texting is very convenient, but all of these things will be weaponized against us and have been weaponized against us. The NSA already listens to every single phone call in the country.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't face any repercussions for that. And that was Ted Kaczynski's thing. And while I renounce terrorism, I think it's instructive or insightful.
Thank you for officially doing that, by the way.
But I think it's insightful.
We're editing that out, by the way.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Kill the right people. No. Yeah, like I say, that like what is the Unabomber known for in this country? His shack is in a museum in Washington, D.C. He's in federal prison as someone that murders people should be. I suppose we can abolish prisons for all I care, but like,
is he still alive in a prison?
He is still alive. He's still writing.
Mm-hmm.
But he's disgraced, right? A whole narrative is created around him that he's crazy. He was living in this small cabin. You should look at how small it is. You can go to a museum and see how small his house was. What a crazy person that he would not live in a nice apartment. You know, your giant New York apartment that's so spacious. He was living in a small thing that wasn't perfectly insulated. And his philosophy, his modus operandi, the reason he was trying to start a movement to overthrow capitalism, to overthrow industrial society, right? He signed his bombs as though they were the part of a group. There was no group. He was trying to jumpstart something that other like-minded people would see the way he saw it in this very clear and extreme way. But he's branded as a lunatic, right? But PG&E kills hundreds of people a year.
Yeah.
Are they not welcome in high society? No.
What was the name of this group?
He was, it wasn't a group, but he was signing them as with like different aliases and things.
Oh,
and he was including like notes that implied like correspondence between people that don't exist. And in his mind, he felt that the only way to stop this march of industrialization and colonialism and like industrial capitalism that's cutting down the jungles of Borneo, child labor in China, damming the rivers. The only way to stop it is with this dramatic show of force, and to hopefully inspire other people to like stand up to this machine. That's what he was thinking, I suppose. But I think it's really instructive that no one's really read the manifesto, right? No one. He's just branded as a lunatic, and a complete like he'd be disgraceful to believe in whatever he believed in. But no one. Chevron's executives are all multimillionaires. They've murdered. They hired people to murder people. Not only have they indirectly killed thousands of people, they've had people killed. And are they in prison? No. They have TV channels devoted to just like celebrating what's happening with them.
Jason, we are going to wrap up because truly we could talk about this for 4.5 hours.
Sure. And
yes,
I'm sorry you're all on a watch list now, and that's my bad. But
no, David was on a watch list for being too much of a good boy, and I'm on a drywall watch list.
Yeah, I dispute that. I'm a bad boy. I want for the record, everyone, I'm naughty. All right.
Yeah.
But Jason, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate talking to you.
Thanks for having me. It was nice to talk to some humans.
Yeah. Be well.
I don't get to do that every day in quarantine, so it's very. Thank you for letting me expound my terrorism, my philosophical belief.
Look forward to seeing what you look forward to seeing your mugshot. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Jason.